We have an official update for the Monday box office, and Endgame now officially has just crossed $2.5 billion. So the current total right now is $2,503,147,738. A lot of the numbers and statistics for international box office figures aren't actually recorded that much and not easy to get a hold of. And so there isn't really any official list of how fast films got to a certain amount of money for the international or for the total world box office. So this $2.5 billion that Endgame got, I'd be willing to say that it's the fastest $2.5 billion ever, even including inflation. There's only one other film that's ever earned $2.5 billion or more without inflation, which is Avatar. But even if inflation is put on, I'm sure this $2.5 billion smashes the time every other film's ever taken to get to that amount of money. So I would say semi-officially that this is the fastest $2.5 billion ever. On the actual daily figures for Monday, Avengers Endgame was the number one film again, as it was on Sunday and Saturday, but not so much on Friday. Pokemon was number 2 with $3.6 million. Avengers got $4.7 million. Basically exactly in line what the Infinity War reduction was. So Infinity War got a 75.8% reduction for the same day, and this got a 76% reduction, so pretty much bang on where Infinity War was running. So once again, onto our chart with The Force Awakens, Avatar, Endgame, Infinity War, Jurassic World, and The Last Jedi, and we can see that it is still well clear of just about everything except for Avatar. It is closing in on the Avatar total. Avatar got $760 million. And we can see that it is underneath the blue line, and the gap is just going to get bigger from here. So it is underneath Star Wars The Force Awakens. It has went and flattened out a little bit from the Monday, just like the Star Wars The Force Awakens money flattened out on its equivalent Monday. And it will also be flat for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then it'll angle back up for the upcoming weekend, but it will not gain on The Force Awakens. So it is behind The Force Awakens right now. It will continue to be behind The Force Awakens, and it will continue to get further behind The Force Awakens from this point on. When we look at the total gross records, absolutely nothing has changed since last time. Here is the non-inflation adjusted US domestic total records. Endgame still number 3, so it's above Black Panther still, and it is still behind Avatar. It is closing in on Avatar's $760 million, but not quite there yet. On the inflation adjusted US totals, it is still behind Fantasia. Fantasia has $748 million with Endgame's $728 million, so still a fair few days to go until it overtakes Fantasia. And on the non-inflation adjusted world totals, still number 2, still behind Avatar. Avatar's got $2.788 billion, and we now have $2.5 billion for Endgame. And lastly, on the inflation adjusted world totals, it is still number 5, so it has not moved up from 5th biggest film ever with inflation. It is still behind Star Wars: A New Hope. And so the only question really left is, can it beat Avatar's $2.788 billion? If we take a look at the raw numbers for the US domestic market right here, day 18 is what we just had for the Monday. And we can see on the right-hand side here we have Endgame, on the left-hand side we have A Force Awakens. And Endgame's total now is $728 million, and that lines up with The Force Awakens' $750 million. So that is the fastest $750 million ever, Force Awakens. So that is the first record that Endgame has not actually got. It did tie for the equal fastest $700 million, which it tied with Force Awakens on the Saturday we just had. But The Force Awakens now, fastest 750, Endgame has not got that record. If you look down the list as we go, we can see that on the day 23, that is when The Force Awakens got $800 million. That is the upcoming Saturday. And I think at this stage, Endgame will have around about $760 million at that stage. So it'll be about $40 million behind. And if we look further down on the left-hand side, on the last line there, the 31st day, that's the Sunday in 2 weeks' time, that is when The Force Awakens passed $850 million, which is the fastest $850 million, and obviously the only $850 million. And at an equivalent time, I think Endgame will have around about $800 million there. I have $799 million there listed. So it'll be about $50 million behind at the end of the 5th weekend. And so I think at this point in time, if everything stays the way that I'm predicting here, I think Endgame will get around about $835 million in the US domestic market. Now, I did more recently say I think 850 is a good target. I still think 850 is a good target. I'm not going to adjust the target every day. But to get an absolute specific number where I think it's looking at right now, $835 million is what I think is the best number right now for what Endgame will get in the US domestic market. And that's about $107 million more than what we have right now. So that's how much extra money I think is available in the US market for Endgame, another $107 million. So if you now look at the foreign market, what I have here is a chart showing the Chinese box office for Endgame versus the US box office. I've got an extra day's data for China than the US, so it goes out a little bit further, and China did start about 2 days before the US as well. But you can see here for the last several days, or the last week and a bit, China has basically stopped earning money compared to what it's earned in the US. So they were neck and neck going back and forth, but now China's basically done. So China earned a bit over $1 million. I think it was $1.8 million yesterday in the box office for Endgame, and that's basically where it's at now. So the Chinese box office is just about done for Endgame's total. And that's also true for a lot of other countries in the foreign market. So the US market is still earning more money in a comparative percentage rate compared to what the foreign countries are now actually earning. And as I just said before, I think there's about $107 million extra that we'll get out of the US market. Certainly don't think there's $107 million extra that we'll get out of China. And so if we look at our totals of Avatar versus Endgame, we've got $2.7 billion for Avatar, $2.5 billion for Endgame. That gives us a gap right now of $273 million. So Endgame only needs an additional $273 million from here to actually become the biggest film ever without inflation. And I've just stated that I think it'll get about $107 million extra in the US domestic market than what it has here. So if we take $107 million off this $273 million, which it needs to overtake Avatar, that leaves us with a little bit over $165 million, $165.8. So $166 million is what it needs in the foreign market to actually overtake Avatar. And so if you look once again at the same chart with China versus the US box office, we can see China is not going to help us out to get this $166 million. There's not that much money left to get out of the Chinese box office. So the question is there enough money left in the other major markets, the South Korea, the United Kingdom, Australia, France, Germany, Brazil, Mexico, and so on? They've got enough money left to get us to this $166 million mark. I think it can still be done, but I do think it's a lot harder to do than it just looks on the surface with the ridiculous amount of money that Endgame's already earned. And so going forward, I think we're looking at around about a $6.1 million box office on Tuesday. It's possible it'll be higher than that if it gets a bigger boost on the Tuesday, but that's roughly in line with what Infinity War did. So $6.1 million for Tuesday, and it should be the biggest film on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday still. On Friday, the new John Wick film is out, John Wick 3 Parabellum. I think that'll be the number one film out of the box office, and I think that'll end Endgame being the number one film. Endgame was temporarily pushed off on the last Friday, but that was mostly because the advanced screening money was also added in for the Pokemon film. But I think this will be the end of Endgame being the number one film in the box office. After that, I think the week after that, we've got Aladdin coming out. So imagine Aladdin will be the number one film in 2 weeks' time in the box office. And then we have Dark Phoenix coming out and The Secret Life of Pets 2. So I think both of them will earn more money than Endgame gets at that particular point in time. And the week after that, we've got Men in Black International and so on. So there's a lot of competition coming out, a lot of other films to pick from, I should say. They're not really competition as such. Endgame's towards the end of its run, so it's not going to be earning that much money. But I think that'll be the end of it being the number one film in the US box office on Thursday. So after Thursday, Endgame will no longer be number one. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.